center yourself.
We are live.
If you could please center yourself. Set your frame.
Or we are live.
Good afternoon, viewers. I, Sayyeda Hurulan, Manager Education and Training and Joint Secretary of Digital Assurance and Accounting Board, welcome you all to the mind-boggling session of Digital Audit Evolution for shaping the next generation of auditors by revolutionizing conventional audit into digital audit on the behalf of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan. Let's begin the proceedings of this prestigious webinar with the recitation of Holy Quran.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Ar-Rahmanir-Rahim. The Beneficent, the Merciful. Maliki Yawmiddin. Owner of the Day of Judgment. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Thee alone we worship, Thee alone we ask for help. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Show us the straight path. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. The path of those whom Thou hast favored, not the path of those who earn Thine anger, nor of those who go astray.
Before I proceed further, I would request you all to please spare a few minutes, take out your phones and go to your Facebook application and check in to our webinar today. Thank you. Owning unique impression of developing future leaders in the field of audit and accountancy for the digital economy, the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan is kicking off an exclusive webinar series from the platform of Digital Assurance and Accounting Board. As you all know, that the accountancy profession has an excellent opportunity to benefit from the digital transformation that is taking place across the globe amid COVID-19 crisis. The webinar is planned keeping the role of professional accountants in view as trusted advisors combined with digital companies opens new opportunities and business areas for them if they grasp the opportunities that technology offers. Let me take you to the program of today's session. The program begins with the inaugural address of the Chairman of Digital Assurance and Accounting Board, Rana M. Usman Khan. Then we move forward to the plenary session comprising of global, regional, and Pakistan's perspectives, where our distinguished speakers will take you to the entire journey of digital transformation happening all across the globe in the audit and accountancy. Thereafter, our chief guest, Mr. Khalilullah Sheikh, will address the viewership. Vote of thanks will be given by Mr. Iftikhar Tajmir, the council member of ICAP and a member of Digital Assurance and Accounting Board as well. In the end, we are having an interesting surprise for you, so stay tuned. Now, viewers, I would like to request the fountainhead of leadership, Vice President of ICAP and Chairman of Digital Assurance and Accounting Board, Rana M. Usman Khan to open the session with his inaugural address. Over to you, Mr. Khan.
Thank you very much, Hur. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hope everybody can hear me. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, very loud and clear.
Thank you very much. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Our Honorable Chief Guest, President ICAP, I think who is at the moment not here, but definitely he'll be joining us in due course. Distinguished speakers, Mr. Chris Potter, Mr. Sri Lanka, Mr. Riaz Nehular, Hena, Zulfikar, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and assalamu alaikum. Firstly, a very warm welcome to this very first event of Digital Assurance and Accountancy Board of ICAP. A very humble first step of DAAB towards a long journey of learnings, competence building, and keeping pace with global developments, enhancements on digitalization and technological front. As we are all aware and we all are witnessing that the accountancy profession is rapidly changing and reshaping its future outlook by means of new technologies, which are increasingly impacting the business environments. And definitely when they are impacting the business environments of our clients, they are impacting our practices, they are impacting the accountants in practice, they are impacting the accountants in industry. So definitely in this scenario, the accountancy profession needs to be ready to adopt these technologies in order to stay relevant and deliver valuable services in a digital economy, I must say. Sensing this with an upbeat of mindset, the Digital Assurance and Accounting Board has been established by ICAP, ICAP Council, with the objective to serve the public interest, to contribute policy recommendations, and to provide support towards embedding technology-based solutions in accounting, insurance, and other businesses where our members are definitely serving. As has been conceived because multiple stakeholders are impacting our profession, so the board has also representation from all relevant stakeholders. I must say, including accountants in profession, industry, academia, definitely they have the role to play to develop the syllabus for or curriculum for our future accountants. And last but not the least, IT digitalization experts, both from public and private sectors. So these all, they sit together and definitely they bring their technological expertise to the board, and of course from there we'll be finding solutions for our members. To make it more effective, the board has formed a few working groups to contribute to their technological acumen in the areas of digital technology, digital accounting and reporting, e-audit, assurance, and digital transformation in public sector. Keeping that all in view, today's event, I would say, being the humble beginning for this DAAB platform, we at the board have also plans to organize various webinars, IT digitalization showcasing events, because we'll be carrying out research. So whatever we do there, we have to showcase to our members, and definitely we'll be bringing that through these platforms, seminars, conferences, to disseminate DAAB's work and to educate the entire CA fraternity across the globe. We also have plans to organize junctures between technology providers and our members in practice, because this board is going to play that role where we'll bring together our members and they'll sit with the in SMPs to enable them to meet these challenges. Because what I can see is that the larger size firms, definitely they have resources, they have their own, let's say, researches to cope with these technological changes, but our SMP sector, of course, they require a lot of support. So the objective, one of the major objectives, I would say, of the board is to bring technological experts together with our practicing members to enable them to meet these challenges. And definitely at the Institute and particularly at DAAB, we are committed to extend every possible support to all our audit and accountancy practitioners and protect them from freezing out from the market. Towards the end, in view of these challenges, commitments, we also outlined how the profession needs to think about a technology-driven future and how it needs to work together with IT and technology experts. As I said in the beginning, and who has also said this, that the board has kicked off a series of activities, including exclusive webinars on the future of audit and accountancy profession in the digital world. Today's webinar has also been planned considering one of the most critical challenges of our profession, conventional auditing to digitalization, digital audit, which aims to bring together forward-thinking accountants to pave the way towards incubating sustainable digital ecosystem for the profession of audit and assurance. As Gur said in the beginning, the event has been structured to have a global perspective, a regional perspective. I mean the SAFA region, and of course the CAPA region, where we join hands with our other regional bodies, and definitely the Pakistan perspective on digitalization of audit, assurance, business and profession. Because what we are doing here in Pakistan, when we compare it with the global developments and the regional developments, definitely that will give us a way to look at where the future is. We are honored, privileged to have galaxy of speakers across the world to address all these perspectives. And I'm confident that it will be a great learning experience and opportunity for all of us. I once again welcome you all to this great learning opportunity. With these words and without taking much of your time, I am handing over the command of the webinar to Sayyida Hurulan for the webinar proceedings. Hope you'll enjoy this, and this will be a great learning opportunity for all of us. Over to you for the next proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. Khan, for your visionary thoughts and setting the momentum of the webinar on the right track. This dynamic 2.5-hour journey is packed with real-life case studies, fresh insights, industry trends, and leading best practices. So let's begin with that. Let me introduce you with my first panel member, who will be talking about the e-audit, a revolution of digital transformation and ethical challenges encountered by the profession in adoption of artificial intelligence. Mr. Chris Potter, he is a partner in the digital audit practice within PwC from United Kingdom. He has over 30 years of audit experience, mostly within the financial services industry, covering retail and investment banking, insurance, and asset management. Chris has led the controls and IT audit work on many of PwC's largest financial services clients. Chris also sits on the global governance group that oversees the IT development of PwC's audit tools, and was for 5 years on the committee that approved UK IT investments. He has also presented externally on digital transformation challenges and lessons to both business people and technologists. If I talk more about him, then I may take 3 to 4 hours. I really don't want to take much of your time, and I pass on the command to Mr. Chris Potter to share his valued thoughts on the topic of e-audit and transformation of the profession in adoption of artificial intelligence. Over to you, Mr. Chris Potter.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much indeed for inviting me to speak with you. And I'd like to welcome you into my home. One of the interesting things about coronavirus is that it has shown us how technology is enabling us to work in different ways. And since March, when we went into lockdown in the United Kingdom, most people who have worked in an office job, as has happened in many countries, have been asked to work from home. And the technology has really enabled us to change the way that we operate. And is a real illustration of how technology is changing the audit. So if we can move on a slide, please. What I would like to take you through is some of those emerging technology trends and how they are affecting the accounting profession and audit around the world. I'd like to brief you a little bit about how we have taken technology into the PwC audit process today, and then talk about some of those key practical challenges for the future from two perspectives, from the perspective of the auditor and also from a perspective of the client, because technology is impacting both the auditor and the clients that we serve. So let's start with the first of those areas and look at some technology trends. Move on. So there are lots of catalysts of change that we see, and what we're seeing is a big impact of these changes. So 77% of global CEOs think that technology advances will transform their business over the next 5 years. And these kind of changes, what are we seeing? We're seeing increased globalization driven by technology. Though interestingly, coronavirus seems to be pushing against that. We're seeing borders come back up in the physical world in a way that we hadn't seen over previous years as people have tried to control the spread of the virus. But in the technology world, in the IT world, as demonstrated by this seminar, we're seeing that those borders, the technology has removed borders and then enabled global communication. And clearly technology is becoming cheaper and cheaper. We're seeing people increasingly comfortable, particularly the younger generations, with the use of technology. So if we move on a slide. Everybody will have seen these kind of charts and heard of things like Moore's Law. So over the past decades, we've seen the cost of technology come down exponentially. And that trend is continuing. And probably the most important aspect of that is on the connectivity, the chart on the right, which has enabled over the last decade us to move to cloud computing, which has had a massive change. But the change in storage also means that we're able to store more and more data. And the data that we will gather in the next year or two is more data than we've gathered in the rest of history. So the rate of data capture is enormous, which means that that data can then be used to fuel artificial intelligence, machine learning, which thrives on having big data to play with. So if we move on a slide. In terms of technology adoption, again, this is looking at US household data over the last 50 or 60 years. And you'll see that essentially the lines become steeper. So the rate at which new technologies are adopted into the household happens faster and faster as time has gone on. And that's probably the biggest impact of all of these over the last decade has been the rise of smartphone usage. So when I started in my technology role within PwC about 8 years ago, smartphones were really only coming into the workplace, but now they're very much dominant, and all of our applications need to be able to work on people's smartphones. Moving on. What are the technology trends that we need to be aware of. There are a whole bunch of different technology trends out there. The Internet of Things is talked about a lot and in particular areas. That's important. Drones are interesting. So we've started to use drones to carry out physical inventory checks. So if you have a large coal heap, for example, it's very difficult through traditional stock count methods to measure that. But you can fly a drone over, you can capture lots and lots of data points, and you can then accurately build up a picture of the size of the heap of material. So we're starting to see those kind of technologies come into the auditing. Blockchain is starting to change the whole way that transactions are recorded between different companies. And so the ability to audit blockchain will become quite important in the future. But probably the biggest one on the list is artificial intelligence. And that's the one which people focus on. So move on a slide. Well, what does our technology look like? Well, we really have three core elements to our technology that we use in PwC. At the heart of it is Aura, which is our working paper system. Our audit file is in Aura, and that's used across all of our audits worldwide. And then supporting that, we have two platforms. Halo, which is all about how we analyze our clients' data, and Connect, which is all about how we collaborate with our clients and ask them for the information we need and receive the information from them. So moving forward to the slide. At the heart of Aura is risk assessment. So audits need to be driven by risks, and within Aura, we set up risks and then we use these risk sliders to indicate what our audit approach is to each of these areas. Moving on. Connect. So Connect allows us to project manage our audits more effectively. Allows us to set up a schedule of what we need from our clients when we need, and receive that information securely and track the progress of the audit. And moving on. And Halo is all about the use of data visualization technologies, again, an area which has really grown over the last 5 to 10 years, applying data visualization to the large volumes of client transactions. So in this case, this is they're looking at general ledger data, and it's enabling us to actually visualize and see how those postings on the journal entries have appeared, and then we can drill in and explore the data and see where the exceptions might lie. And globally, we've now processed hundreds of billions of journals around the world through our Halo system. And what that then enables us to do, we move on a slide, is it allows us to apply artificial intelligence to our information. So it allows us to, using all of that big data that we've captured, work out, teach a machine how to interpret the data, and then have that machine then go through the millions and millions and billions of journals that we're processing and actually pick out for us what the most risky of those journal items are, using the kind of logic that the auditor would do if they had the time to look at every journal item, which of course they don't. So it's a more sophisticated way of applying traditional computer-assisted audit techniques. And we're using the same kind of artificial intelligence techniques within the cash area, for example, to automatically match up bank confirmations, to automatically check bank reconciliations, and These are the kind of areas where artificial intelligence is proving very valuable on the audit process. We move on a slide. So what are the practical challenges? There are lots of challenges with this. This is not easy stuff to do. And not every initiative that people try to achieve succeeds on this. Some of the challenges to pull out, investing in bespoke technology is an expensive game. And so it tends to be only the larger firms who have been able to afford this. Most of the third-party solutions are marketed at internal audit rather than the external financial audit. In many territories, there's a lack of standardization, which makes it difficult to automate activities. So to give an example, in Belgium, company accounts follow an extremely prescribed format. You have to put the numbers in an identical way from every set of financial statements to another set of financial statements. This makes it very easy to automate. In the UK, our accounting standards allow much more latitude for people to change the way that they present the information. And that makes it much harder for a machine to be able to understand. The auditing standards themselves run the risk of lagging behind. To give an example of that, when you carry out analytics procedures, auditing standards very sensibly say that the auditor should form their independent expectation before they see the actual numbers. And that's because otherwise, when you see the numbers, it colors what your expectation might be because you're only human. So it's better to form your independent expectation first. And that's very sensible in a 1980s, 1990s world. However, when you now apply the techniques of data visualization, actually by putting the actual data in and applying visualization to it, I can see exceptions that I might never have thought of. And so auditing standards at the moment don't really consider that as a technique that the auditor might want to do. And that is inhibiting some of the use of data auditing techniques. Whenever you're doing a year one audit, there's a big transition cost in applying these new technologies. One of the biggest costs on the audit is the data acquisition cost. So how do you get your information from your client into your own systems? Joint audits, these are common in certain parts of the world. So France, for example, long tradition of joint audits. What does that mean if you're using different technologies between the different audit firms? How can you do a consistent audit? It's harder to do. There are issues as well with giving access to regulators and to lawyers, which means that you need third-party type access solutions. You need the layers of security that you would need to be able to do that. And what does all of this mean for career progression? What does it mean for the shape of the audit firm of the future? Because as you put in more machine learning to do more of the detailed transaction work, you need fewer of the junior staff, which means that your traditional pyramid structure changes and possibly even becomes an inverted pyramid over time. And then how do you make sure that if you're taking fewer people in, that you are retaining those talented people within the organization? And what does that mean for the wider role of the audit firm in society, where businesses generally have relied on the audit firms to train up accountants who can then be used by industry? So quite a few challenges for the audit firms associated with the technology. From a client perspective, the pace of technology change increases the risk to organizations of disruption. And how are we considering that as part of the audit? And if we needed an illustration of disruption, coronavirus is probably it. Massive impact to many, many businesses over the last few months. And this has really brought into sharp relief the need for auditors to be assessing going concern, to really understand whether businesses are running severe risks. From a practical perspective, cybersecurity. It is great that our clients are taking cybersecurity more seriously than ever before. But of course, when we as auditors say, well, we want to take all of your data to use for our audit, not unreasonably, they say, well, that needs to be done in a secure way. How can you assure me, PwC, that you are going to take the data in a secure way? Another practical challenge, many of the clients that I've dealt with over the years have extremely complex systems architectures with lots and lots of different applications. In some cases, many thousands of different transaction recording systems. So when you're trying to acquire data out of them, that can make life very difficult to know what data you should be taking from where and how you're going to do it. And it makes it very difficult for the client as well. And last practical challenge is as auditors are now working on cloud-based systems to carry out the audit, it means that our clients now need to give us as auditors access to network bandwidth for us to actually be able to work. So, move on to another slide. I guess the big question that I'd like to leave you with is then, how far can we go with artificial intelligence? And there are significant challenges with artificial intelligence. It offers great opportunities, but it also has pitfalls. And one of the big pitfalls with it is that it is only as good as the data that you feed it and the analytical capability you've built into it. And this can raise significant ethical concerns. You can train a machine to think like a very horrible person. You can train it to be racist, you can train it to be sexist, you can train it to have all kinds of biases in how it looks at data. So how you train your artificial intelligence is key, and how you can provide regulators, stakeholders with assurance about the way that the AI is operating is really important as you move towards greater adoption of artificial intelligence. Generally, where I think we will be is use of machine learning and artificial intelligence to augment the auditor. So at the moment, there is no substitute for the human judgment of the audit engagement leader, partner involved on the job. At the moment, in 30 years, that position may change. Where we are likely to see artificial intelligence augmenting that judgment is on the ability of the machine to look at many, many more individual transactions than a human could possibly do. So we are seeing the ability to move away from sample-based testing, which has always been a bit poor, to being able to look at the whole population and highlight the exceptions and focus in on the riskiest bits. And that's where artificial intelligence provides a big opportunity over the next 5 years. So thank you very much. That was quite a quick run through of some of the trends going on in the environment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chris, for sharing very pragmatic and perspicacious views on the global perspective on e-audit. So viewers, now we are having a session on the regional perspective, for which we are having two panel members, Mr. Amar Gandhar and Mr. Riaz Bihula. First, I would like to invite Mr. Amar Gandhar, who is actually reporting and assurance leader at the Chartered Accountants ANZ and assurance leader over there. Amar trained at top-tier professional services firms including EY in Australia and London, gaining extensive experience in reporting, assurance, and regulation. Amar has been a thought leader on the future of audit for more than a decade. Previously, as Deputy Director, Public Policy and Regulations at the International Federation of Chartered Accountants, he has contributed his intellectual and business acumen on various fronts. Today, he'll be talking about leadership in the digital world, bridging the audit technology and expectations gap. So over to you, Amar. We would like to hear your sagacious thoughts on it.
Thank you very much, Saida. And let me start by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What a privilege to be with you here. What an honor. We have a really wonderful Pakistani chartered accountant community here in Australia. In Sydney, I have many friends in that community, my colleagues from when I was working in EY before, many who I keep in touch with very closely. And there is a very strong chapter of your organization, an active chapter, which I was also privileged to join at an event in 2018 around the World Congress event. So I still have, wonderful memories of that. I think it was such a fantastic start to the presentation, both Rana and Chris's presentations. My presentation will perhaps zoom out a little bit and look at some of what I'm going to try to do is not to really go very deep into the detail of specific technologies. I think there's no way I can compete with someone like Chris on that. But I'm going to try to look at some of the bigger developments and the context which impacts on embracing technology in our profession internationally, as well as provide some of the reasons why it's very important for us to adopt technology very centrally into our work. The expectation gap, of course, is a long-standing issue, and there are ways that technology can help to address that. But at the same time, if we don't have the expectation gap and that bigger picture central in how we adopt technology, it can also end up potentially making things worse. In my role, I engage a lot with many stakeholders quite broadly of the profession. That includes, of course, auditors and the profession itself, CFOs, but beyond that, regulators, the political world, investors, directors. And I think it gives me the benefit of quite a broad set of perspectives. And I'm going to try, what I've tried to do here is really draw on those to identify some of the key trends and challenges surrounding our adoption of technology into the profession. There are a lot of unanswered questions here and some things maybe which hopefully will prompt your thoughts. And I have no doubt that some of these same challenges are things that you will be seeing in Pakistan. But as I think it was Albert Einstein who said, paraphrasing, it's all about having the right question, not necessarily, starting off with thinking you've got all the answers. So I've certainly got a lot of questions here, but I hope that you'll be able to fill in the answers. So if I can just go to the next slide. So I think first it's worth just touching on the fact that we do tend to have a bit of a binary approach in many of the debates around the future of audit. Either everything's going well and leave us alone, or it's in a crisis, and it really depends on what's happening in the newspaper in a given week, which one it might sort of go to. But the reality really is that we do have some major challenges and issues when it comes to trust, quality, and if audit is meeting expectations, and technology is very much central to that. But we also have a very solid foundation for auditing to evolve. And before we get to those key challenges that we've been hearing about, I want to start with some of the bigger picture context and positives. So if I can just move to the next slide. Part of my work at the International Federation of Accountants before coming back home here to Australia. So I was with ICAP for about 4 years in New York, and I was really leading our engagement with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and in particular the International Organization Partnership. And the reason I raise this is it gave me the advantage of being able to look at about 50 different international organizations across all of the different industries you could imagine, whether that's aviation, electrical standards, all of the key United Nations bodies, the World Health Organization, which of course is very central in the discussion right now. And I was surprised because I must say, before going to that, I thought that what we had in professional accounting in terms of our international standards and our frameworks and the approach was something that existed across all of the industries. I just assumed that. But what I found out was really accountancy is the only profession where you can say you have such a robust mechanism for an international profession and approach, whether that's on our basic standards, and in fact that can also serve to drive the uptake of technology to address these challenges that I'm going to touch on in a moment. The next few slides really just serve to emphasize that. So the next one shows the global adoption of international standards, and you can see up the top, very high level of adoption in more than 120 countries of the international auditing standards. And there isn't really any other profession or industry where you could say that. In fact, not even close. The next slide actually just illustrates that it's not only adoption of that consistent framework across the globe for, the reason I'm touching on this very much is because this is our product, if you think about it, consistent across the globe. It's actually a very high level, as you can see on the top there, 80 out of 100 in this survey of direct adoption. So that's without actually even amending those international standards. Over to the next slide, and this is a little bit, if you just move to the next, a little bit tongue-in-cheek here. One of my colleagues in that international organizations partnership was an Australian, and so we would have the meetings in Geneva and in Paris, and we got to talking. She was from the organization that deals with international electrical standards. And having been to a bunch of different meetings in different countries, I had to say, look, you guys need to really get this together, because of course there is a long way to go in having some consistent standards around that and lots of other things. And look, there are many good reasons why that's the case that she outlined for me, but I think it also serves to show that quite literally there really aren't aren't many other areas where you could say you have, you know, the same language, the same rules, the same approach right across 120 or more countries that we've actually achieved over the last, let's say, 20 to 30 years in accountancy. But why is that important? And the next slide is some research that was done at ICAP that showed in many areas, auditing has an impact on quality of life. It had an impact, this slide shows the positive impact in tackling corruption, where it was a correlation between the key measures of you know, tackling corruption with adoption of you know, the standards and the ethical approach in the code of ethics. And there are, you know, you could equally have slides up here showing the correlation with better growth, better standards of living, and many other important things. And I think it's probably important also, just on the next slide, which is some more recent research, and we've actually just updated this research and launched our preliminary findings, but this was from last year's survey of retail investor confidence in Australia and New Zealand. We looked at a representative sample of those sort of private retail investors in the share market. And if you think about all of the questions around trust in auditing, you know, it's daily in the press. You really have to put that into context, and you can see here the most trusted group when it comes to supporting investor protection are auditors. And I can tell you it's an even stronger result in the results we've just seen for this year. This was based on a survey that, of course, the Centre for Audit Quality does in the United States each year, and they have very similar results. Over to the next slide. This just simply illustrates also the high level of confidence in audited financial information. It probably is worth noting here, though, if you look at the red part of this bar, the 40%, that's the number of people who have some confidence in audit, as opposed to quite a bit or a great deal of confidence. And that's quite important. You might say that that is really why we're having such a big debate about auditors. That's the swinging voters that really could go either way. And I think that's the group that we need to think about as we're thinking about trust in auditing and how technology can help to drive trust in auditing. Over to the next slide, some more context. This was a study of the public, actually, which was done right across the globe, and perhaps I should have added in some of the other countries. We had about 10 countries, all had similar results, where we were asking the public what they expect from audit, and no surprises here for anyone who's been an observer of the expectations gap over many decades. The public want more, but particularly in the area of what they say is preventing corporate collapses, the solvency and liquidity of companies, as well as tackling fraud and other areas that we'd asked about in some of the other questions. So that gap remains very large. And so we come to, if you just jump over to the next slide, and so we have this gap. And what I wanted to touch on for the rest of the presentation are a few of the specific parts of that gap, as I've heard in stakeholder outreach over the past, years, with many of those different stakeholders, whether it's the business community, directors, investors, or others. And in thinking through that, and just over to the next slide, you really have to think. I think it's a really important question. This sort of goes to the heart of, I guess, what I'm trying to say here. If we can just switch over to that next slide. Technology provides so much promise and opportunity to deal with the issues that the profession is facing internationally in just about every jurisdiction. At the same time, as Chris highlighted, it has so many challenges that come along with it. And so the reason I'm bringing this into the context of really the current challenges, existential challenges that the profession faces, is that, you know, it really seems essential that we have clarity around what it is we're trying to achieve with technology, and how it relates to the wider context. So just over to the next slide. Nowhere particularly right now in the debate around our profession is it more you know, intense than the discussion around the role of auditors in relation to fraud and misconduct, and in particular fraud. There are you know, so many ways that intelligent people can argue and disagree about what the auditing standards mean in terms of the responsibilities of auditors for detecting or reporting on fraud. And technology, of course, and we saw a very good example in the system that Chris outlined, does have the potential to greatly augment the auditor's ability to detect fraud. But one of the challenges is, what are the limits, and how can we you know, communicate to the wider community what the capabilities are when it comes to tackling fraud. So that includes through, for example, analytics, and in our view at Chartered Accountants Australia New Zealand, in addressing the risk of fraud, we very much are trying to promote a prevention approach as much as an approach that focuses on detection. And to really go down that road requires looking at controls and the quality of internal controls in an organisation, which make it harder for a fraud to be perpetrated, and harder for a fraud to be perpetrated with, you know, going undetected. Now, technology has such a huge role to play in underpinning those systems of internal control, particularly if you think about doing it with everyone working from home, as we find ourselves in the current situation. But at the same time, there is a great deal of human intervention and interaction when it comes to something as complicated as a control system. And so therein lies perhaps the first major challenge in adopting technology. And we've seen that play out in companies going online with how they're managed, as well as, of course, how the audits are conducted. Over to the next slide. Of course, the close cousin of any debate on the role of auditors in detecting fraud is the role of auditors in detecting or preventing corporate collapses or business failures. And I think anyone who's watched these debates playing out closely will begin by saying, you know, despite the outcry that occurs after just about any major corporate collapse, including the ones that are in the newspapers right now, corporate collapses are an important and actually in some ways a rejuvenating and good part of any market-based economy. The problem really comes in, and this is through, I guess, my own personal observations and again, that engagement with stakeholders, when the corporate collapse happens suddenly and without warning, and there's an element of mismanagement and a lack of clarity that means it's not really obvious what's actually happened. And sometimes a fraud can lead to a corporate collapse, and where you don't have a good, strong system of internal controls and transparency around that, it can be many months or years later, and it becomes actually very unclear where the tipping point was from a criminal act or a fraud into a situation where a business fails. And the crime is, and all of the evidence is possibly covered up from many years ago. So once again, we're in a situation where the quality of the internal control and the ability of auditors to provide integrity around that is a really key way of tackling the issue. Just over to the next slide, and I'll try to move quickly through the remaining few sort of issues. Of course, a massive issue for auditors is in the and preparers and directors is the challenge of estimates, intangibles, and all of the judgments that go into financial statements. No one has a crystal ball, but at the same time, so much of the balance sheet requires us to look forward and try to interpret and anticipate how things are going to play out in the future. I can't think of a year before 2020 in the COVID-19, where we're actually heading to our year-end balance dates, or in the reporting season right now in Australia, which is mostly 30 June year ends. And I've never seen an instance where it puts it in such a clear focus, how hard it is to try to anticipate what the future is going to look like, whether that's cash flows, forecasts underpinning impairment testing, or all sorts of different things. Now, technology has a really major role to play in helping to underpin much more sophisticated models. But once again, it's the human element and how that capability is utilized that really is perhaps the more challenging part, and also the more important part for being able to maintain trust in those estimates. A related point is in regards to digital reporting, which is, of course, an important. I think it's an important topic to have on the table here as well, while we're talking about digital audit, and a taxonomy and a data-based driven approach to reporting opens up a lot of more avenues for communicating these softer estimates in financial statements. So once again, we have a challenge and we have a major opportunity in embracing technology. The next slide really highlights, I'm sure, what is a really important challenge in Pakistan, and it certainly is here in Australia and New Zealand. And that is the challenges faced by small and medium practices who work primarily with small and medium-sized companies, entities, businesses, and family businesses. Now, there is, of course, the very important work that the International Auditing and Assurance Standards Board is currently doing in this area. But we think, and most of the discussions and roundtables that I've been party to, see technology very much as part of the solution here as well. It's likely to be a different kind of technology, probably not exactly the same type of technologies or software packages that Chris was talking about. But nonetheless, when you're looking at how smaller firms engage with their clients, achieve analytics and even match some of those capabilities that are opening up at the larger firms, technology, of course, is a great challenge for many of those businesses, as is any sort of change for smaller firms to tackle, in just given how how busy it can be and how moving from one client to the next. But it also can be a great equalizer in terms of opening up many ways to work with clients, particularly smaller clients, because that means you've got the capacity to deal with the data that they would have. So for smaller firms to be able to work in a way that may not have been possible previously. The next slide really is simply to highlight the much bigger challenge in the current time, where we have a trust deficit in everything. And technology really is not immune from that. I mean, you've only got to look at the distrust around social media, the privacy issues, artificial intelligence. You know, Chris touched on a lot of those challenges. We really need to be aware of these issues in bringing technology and leading technology into auditing. But at the same time, if we don't embrace the opportunities that technology provide, I hope I've outlined a few of the key ones in the last few slides. It's going to be very hard for our profession to keep up with the deficit in trust in institutions and business. And again, I think both Rana and Chris kind of ended up in the same place as what I'm about to say, and that is there's nothing that can replace the human part of the accounting profession, and the chartered accountant themselves enabled or augmented by these new tools. And a huge part of this is their ethics and their ability to be aware of the perceptions of their ethics, as well as their actual ethics and their actual, for example, independence. That really is central to us being able to maintain trust as we go forward into what in many ways is a brave new world. The last slide, I won't focus on too much, although it's a bit of a busy slide, I realise that. This is a comprehensive plan which Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand created based on a lot of outreach with stakeholders. And I give it just as an example. We submitted this to the parliamentary inquiry on auditing in Australia. And I think you could look at just about any of the recommendations we had here, really to deal with the kinds of challenges that I was just going through. They all really will be underpinned by technology, particularly when you're looking at the relevance of audit services and how they tackle risks and the quality of audits. I guess one of the reasons I provide this example is that the briefing was for me to talk about leadership in embracing technology. And I think this is an example of where I have to credit the Board of Chartered Accountants in pushing us to have a very clear view and take a position on issues that have to do with the future of the profession, and think about how technology is part of that. And I can say that the reaction from the Parliament has been to adopt recommendations in a report, including mandating or at least making digital reporting standard practice in Australia, internal controls auditing, and many of the things that we've put forward here that really will serve to address the challenges faced in the regulatory framework for the profession adopting technology. So I'll leave it there. I hope that's given a bit of a bigger picture view into some of the challenges and how technology is so important a part of our future as a profession.
Very interesting presentation indeed, Mr. Amr. I'm sure our global viewership enjoyed this learning experience. Mr. Amr, you talked in great length, and I appreciate your cognizance and dexterity on the topic. You have a great command, and it is indeed a very super fantastic presentation. So my next speaker will be Mr. Riaz Mihuda, who will share his experience from the platform of SACA in the context of regional perspective. He is managing partner of KPMG at Sri Lanka and Maldives, and he's also a chairman of KPMG's Middle East and South Asia regional cluster. He counts over 40 years of experience in audit and advisory areas. Riaz drives innovation in KPMG in Sri Lanka by executing automated, agile, intelligent, and scalable technology He has served many boards and firms at the C-suite level. If I talk about him, it will take me an hour to share his profile with you all. So without taking much of your time, I am handing over the command of the webinar to Mr. Riaz Mahula to share his views on tapping the potential of audit data analytics and its future outlook. Over to you, Mr. Riaz.
Okay, thank you, Saida, for that introduction. I think we had some interesting presentations by Chris and also from Amr. Looked at several issues, and some of them actually have teed up very nicely for what I'm going to say. What I'm going to talk to you is about how do we tap the potential of audit and data analytics to audit. Next slide. People keep saying that the future is here. I know we like to sometimes postpone the inevitable, hoping that things like, I still remember one of my earlier senior partners on audit, when IS 39 came around, he said, you know, I'm happy that it's coming into effect much later by the time I'm retired, so I won't have to learn this. So sometimes we want to put things off, right? Anyway, so, but the fact is that, you know, those of us who are in the driving seat in the profession, the future is here. And data and analytics is here to stay already. I mean, if we think that it's going to come the next year or the 5 years or 10 years, I think we are fooling ourselves. We need to accept that it is here, and the question is, how do we manage to make the best use of both data and analytics to be able to see how we can make our audit more efficient. Now, a starting point, if you're going to incorporate data and analytics into an operating model, there is what I would call a prerequisite, and that would be to transition out of what we used to do, a paper-based audit model, to a digital audit process. We in Sri Lanka and KPMG were fortunate. I think partly was driven by the fact that several years ago when KPMG moved to e-audit, at that time, now we moved to Clara. But at that time, they said, we are not going to support the paper-based audit process. So they said, you either move to a full paperless audit. If you stick to paper, you're on your own. You won't get any support from us. So it was a bit of a tough decision at the time because, you know, technology is costly, and we have an office with 1,400 people that you can just use for a country of our size. That number of people means over 1,200 laptops, and you know, and laptops were not the normal commercial laptops that you buy cheap. They come with a whole lot of huge storage and memory capacity. That they are all often the top end. So, but we bit the bullet and did the transition. My advice to people contemplating this is that while the initial investment can be high, the benefits of that transition will pay for itself several times over. Of course, now with technology costs coming down, and now our new Clara being able to run not on VPN, but on internet, which means much more cheaper. But the fact is that, you know, while the initial cost may be high, you will find that the benefits of it will pay for itself. And I just choose one example when we all are going through a period of COVID, when suddenly the government put us into lockdown on the 17th of March. And it was a very tightly controlled lockdown with curfews, island-wide curfews. We suddenly realized the value of the digital process, because we found that we were able to do all our audits with our clients virtually without being on site. So we had our audit teams, we were using our Microsoft Teams platform for collaboration, and we found that we were able to perform a lot of the audits. Sri Lanka, the year end is March, and companies are very keen on getting them done and dusted early. And we were able to fulfill most of them because of the fact that we had made that investment. So particularly, I think whether we like it or not, work from home is going to be a new normal that's going to come. We have in Sri Lanka already given an option to our staff to work 2 days a week from home, but of course they got to apply ahead the week before. And that was facilitated to a large extent by the fact that, you know, it didn't matter whether they were in office or at home or wherever, as long as they put in certain deliverables that were expected from them. So that's the point I want to say, that the future is here, and I think that investment can help. Next slide. Yeah, so this slide, I'm just trying to quickly show you a comparison of what we call the traditional organization to what I call the future organization. And in fact, some of the organizations are already in what I call the right side of what I call the future organization. So in the traditional organizations we had, if you see, a fairly big patch of transactional processes, right? There was some process management, financial risk and controls, but data analytics, if you see in the pie chart on the left, is a very small portion. I mean, it was more a nice to have type of thing. And the consequence of that was the costs were high, business partnering was pretty low, and the value was also less than adequate. But if you look at the future organization, you'll see the data analytics has really garnered a fairly big part of by process management, and the so-called old transactional processes is a small strip. And the consequence of all that is that costs come down, business partnering becomes very high, and of course the value is also high. So that's a quick look at how the organizations, our clients, are transitioning out from traditional organizations to future organizations. And if we don't gear ourselves to meet this challenge, we will be left behind. Our audit processes will become inadequate. The value that we bring to clients will become inadequate, and all of this have implications to us going forward. Next slide. I think Chris talked about this inversion. This is going to be a big impact on our staff. Traditionally, we had an audit model where we had an army of soldiers out there, the trainee model. And then you had, it came up, where you had in the supervisors and the system managers, the managers, the directors, and you get a partner. And that was the traditional knowledge work value distribution that we had. But you find that that changes now because in the new integrated audit process, the digital audit process, you will find less need for the army of soldiers. Because a lot of what we used to do through use of trainees or lower level, lesser qualified staff is things like were more foundational, transactional, more to do with data normalization, which the computer does it for you. We don't do data normalization anymore because the computer tools, the audit tools can perform that. It doesn't need to have a normalized data to be able to make select samples, for example. It is able to do a much more effective job at what is expected from it. So to me, that's a big impact, and I think one of the things that I think lots of firms, particularly in SAFA, the South Asian region, where we have an audit model, which I think came from the UK originally, where we had a tripartite agreement with the firm, the Chartered Institute, and the trainee, where he did articles, and we were like the training university for the industry as well. But the question now is, can we continue to do that? I know we're not going to be very popular with the institute, because the institute will say, look, the audit firms, and particularly the larger firms, play a very key role because they absorb a large amount of trainees in. But if we switch to a digital model with much lower need for trainees or trainee level accountants and a higher need for more qualified, experienced people who have knowledge of industry, etc., which I talk at the top level on the right. What happens? Who's going to provide the training to the staff? Who's going to provide the training and supply the requirement for the industry, which audit firms traditionally provided in the past? So these are challenges that's going to come. But if we are going to take a realistic assessment of what a future audit firm will look like, to me personally, for example, we have 1,400 people. I can easily cut my staff down to 400, and I can do it as effectively. Part of my problem right now is that I have a commitment to the institute, and being a past president of the institute, there's a lot of pressure also brought on us saying that, look, you have to be mindful of the need to train. But we are running a business, and these are issues that we need to deal with. Clients are demanding a more digital approach to audit. So on the one side, we have to take cognizance that we have clients who have digitalized their business, and therefore they are demanding a digitalized approach to audit. And on the other side, we have our commitments to the institute, where we all came from, of training and providing opportunities. Not that we are not. It's just that we will need much less trainees from the institute going forward if we have this model. Next slide. Right. I'm just going to quickly, this is just a quick landscape of how analytics will shift. We started with earlier a descriptive. We looked at what happened. We more granular analytical reviews. Then we moved into a thing like more diagnostic. Why did it happen? So first we looked at what happened. We now moved into why did it happen. Then we get into the more predictive thing. What will happen based on these data pattern? What will happen? And then of course the prescriptive is what should we do about it. So I see this is a shift which data analytics is going to do to auditors in how they look at analytics and generate insights and recommendations as well. The next slide, and I'm going to move quickly to make sure that I finish in time. I'm going to look at how do we realize the potential of audit. DNA basically provides to me three aspects. One, it realizes the potential of audit through a more focused audit approach. Today, organizations store an enormous amount of data, variety of data, a lot of them traditional financial data, sales, whatnot, a lot of them unstructured. And the DNA facilitates for us a comprehensive risk-based approach to determine what are the significant accounts, right? In the past, we would have looked at a lot more sampling, and with all the deficiencies that Chris talked about, sampling has often been criticized. People say sometimes the samples are not enough, but that's another debate altogether. But data analytics will facilitate a more comprehensive risk-based approach to the determination of significant accounts, so that we don't waste our time diving through loads and loads of data, so that our audit approach becomes much more focused. It also drives audit quality, because through the use of consistent industry knowledge and risk-based approach, which looks at both quantitative and qualitative risk. We talk about risk-based. I know trying to do this manually can be a pretty tough exercise. DNA can help you to get this much more effectively with a greater level of confidence level as to what you are getting at. And of course, the dashboards. The DNA can give you risk dashboards, which will help, for example, if you're a partner, to make a better assessment of the audit process. As you know, we keep saying now that the audit process is a partner-led process, not like the earlier days where we sent an army of juniors out into the field, and then that was reviewed by managers and the senior managers, and then finally look at the partner. But now it is more a partner-led process. You start with the audit planning where the partner gets involved, and having these dashboards, I think, will help the partner to make more a better assessment of how the audit approach should be. Next slide. Okay. Before, I think you've gone one slide more. Can we have the previous slide? No, the next. No. I think you're running one slide before. Okay, so let me work through my. That's one. Thank you. So the second one is where you realize the potential of audits through a value-driven delivery model. As I think Chris talked about it, in the past, audits were all based on samples. Today, the power of systems are such that they can do a complete review of 100% of the population in less time than you will take to select a sample and do the sample. And just imagine the level of confidence that gives you. We have tools now, what is called like continuous audit, continuous monitoring, or CSCM, which can sit on any ERP system and can look at, as long as you know what the criteria are set out, it can do 100% examination. So it therefore gives you what I call a greater value-driven model. It also allows auditors to discover and report on measures, patterns, insights, because one of the things that sometimes people keep telling us is, your audit is a past, where is the value? And often this question comes up, do our auditors providing value to clients? DNA will help us to provide greater level of insights. I know I have been and seen lots of audit committee presentations that were done by our team, and I find that they are able to present much more value. And as part of my role as a managing partner, I do client service review meetings with clients, and one of the consistent messages I get from CEOs and audit committee chairmen is that they see the presentations that are made on the audit by the partners and the team are much more insightful than it was maybe several years ago. So I think, and that I think largely is due to the impact of DNA. Of course, and as I said, that's one of the values that we get. The next slide. Again, we talk about audit efficiency. Audit efficiency is important because, clients are pushing back. There is getting much more difficult to get fee increases. They have their challenges, and this COVID is not going to help. We have immense pressure from clients saying that, can you hold your fee, or can you give us a discount? Everybody is giving discounts. Can you give discounts? So, and these type of pressures are there. And the realistic situation is that we are not going to get the type of increases in fees that, maybe we got maybe several years ago. 5 years ago, companies had the view that they never bargain on audit fees. You ask for the increase and they give it to you. It doesn't happen anymore now. People are pushing back on fee increases. So we need to be much more efficient. We cannot compromise on the quality of the audit. We need to ensure that we get the same level of confidence when giving an opinion, but make sure that we therefore have to find ways in which we can be more efficient in doing the audit and arrive at the same level of confidence without jeopardizing the quality of the audit. So pre-populated interactive planning, analytics, etc., will help us to do this much more efficiently. And also, one of the things clients don't like is surprises. They don't like last-minute surprises. And we find that when you do use more data analytics into your audit process, the chances of there being late surprises gets much more reduced. I'm not saying it gets totally eliminated, because you are looking, the data analytics will give you a much more holistic view of the company, not like the previous one where we did samples or did a more detailed view and suddenly you come up with something that you didn't envisage. Whereas this one helps you to get a much more holistic view, and therefore the possibility of late audit surprises becomes less of an issue. Of course, it also reduces the burden on accounting department. You know, people keep saying the old process, we give an information list, and then we give a second information list, and then we give a third information list. And, you know, this is an eternal tension between clients, accounting department, and auditors, because we do work, then we suddenly find, okay, we find something, we need more information. So we go back to the client getting more information. Whereas in the approach that I outlined, that type of, you know, repeated requests for information could be much more, could be eliminated, because you are able to, in one go, need what you want from the client in order to be able to arrive at your audit assessments. And of course, to us personally, I know we use MS Teams in a big way, and that has hugely helped us to do the audit. An interesting thing that happened during our COVID 31st March, as you know, we went into lockdown on the 17th of March, curfew 24 hours, and, you know, with just a couple of hours for getting essentials in. And we had certain clients who wanted to go ahead with their year-end stock counts. And how do we do the stock observation? And we did manage to do the stock observation using Teams, because, you know, I know we had to do some follow-through work later, but we were able to get a fair amount of confidence on the stock observation process that was done. In Sri Lanka, I think that was one of the first time we had a stock observation done virtual, without being physically present on the client side. But more than others, the MS Teams has helped our staff, wherever they are seated in their homes or wherever, to have interactive discussions. In fact, some of our partners and managers said it's much more easier to get people for a discussion, because, you know, they are stuck at home. They're not out playing golf or going out doing something to the gym. They are at home, and therefore you are able to get people together to discuss an issue fairly quickly. So these communication channels like Teams and, you know, whatever others that are used by different firms have, I think, helped to get a more smart auditing process and to facilitate remote reviews. I know this year, as I think all the big four, you know, we have this quality performance review. And this time the quality performance review is completely virtual. So they are able to review our files completely remote. And that's again another one of the key benefits of going into a paperless audit approach. So apart from all the data analytics that can help you to make your auditing much more efficient, it also comes in useful when we have crises like COVID, which prevents people from traveling, but we can still ensure that our lines of defense with regard to quality reviews, etc., are still maintained. So next slide. I think that's is a quick run through. I ran through some of the slides fairly fast to ensure that I don't go over my 20 minutes. So in summary, basically, while, you know, I know that there is a challenge that often comes, can we meet the cost? Is our fees, is our scale, is our size adequate for us to make this transition? I wanted to basically say from an experience of a firm that did the transition. It was a bullet that we had to bite. The investment was pretty stiff at that time. Because at that time it was on VPNs and high specs computers. Now we don't. It's cloud based, and, you know, we need basically what we do is virtual dumb terminals where you can, you know, which has brought your cost of auditing much lower. So I think maybe firms wanting to move now, costs are much lower, And I would encourage, because it'll make sure that while we solve the problem of making sure we get better audits, better audit quality, better insights to clients, and greater level of confidence in what we report on, and hopefully address part of the expectation gap that Amir talked about. Okay, thank you, Saida. I'll hand you back to you, and happy to go look at questions later on.
Thank you, Mr. Riaz, for sharing your valued experience with keen mental discernment on the topic of your presentation. I'm sure that the viewers find it really interesting, and it helps them in updating on the different maturity levels of new age audit insurance, and embracing in new challenges, and also in learning the pathway to the highest maturity level of digitalization of the profession. So you have heard the views of our panel members in the context of global and regional perspectives. I'm sure you must be interested in knowing the Pakistan's perspective on digital audit evolution. Now, I really want to introduce one of the very, I must say, pragmatic personality. She is the first female partner of Deloitte Yusuf Adel and has been associated with the brand since 2007. She is none other than Ms. Hina Sadiq. She has a very vast experience in audit covering the clientele of financial sector, including banks and insurance, large manufacturing and service industry, and much more. She is an active member of many ICAP committees, including education and training. She is an avid reader and an institution in her personality. She'll be talking about audit dynamics today and tomorrow, Pakistan in a global perspective. Hina, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for such a glowing introduction. I don't think that I know that everyone. Okay, a heads up would be really nice. Can you hear me, Hur? Can everyone hear me?
Yes, now you're clear. Initially, there was some distraction in your voice.
Okay. Okay. Coming back to the presentation.
I would appreciate if you could restart it, because we couldn't hear what did you say in the beginning.
Okay. I just said I thank you for the brilliant introduction. I don't think I deserve quite a bit of it, but I'll take it in my stride, and I will hope that I would justify whatever you said about me. We've been through some brilliant presentations from Chris and Riaz and Amir, and we've seen at least 3 continents being represented in the presentation. Pakistan is not as far behind as far as the audit dynamics are concerned. And digital audit is not something that is new in Pakistan. Yes, we have our fair share of challenges, and today I will be talking about some of them in my presentation. Today, we do have a tendency to stick to the more traditional audit approaches, but I believe that after today and the efforts that are being taken by the Institute to liberalize the digital audit, our companies and our professionals would understand the huge impact that digitization has on our profession, and the value that we can add to our clients, and the way the perspective of audit can change in Pakistan. The next slide, please. Today, times and cultures are changing, and connectivity is the key. We want to be connected. If we have a smartphone, everyone has a smartphone these days. Information has become power. Internet is accessible to one and all. So basically, being connected to your clients, being connected to your profession, the data that is there, it is the key to success. And we've heard this quite a bit in today's webinar, that digital transformation is something that drives value. Why? Because today, when we talk to our clients as audit partners, their perspective of our work and the process that we undertake on a traditional audit is that this is all in the past, and we know what has happened. We know how our business has progressed. There is nothing that you can add, and they perceive it only as an exercise which is done to meet a statutory obligation and to be able to meet their corporate compliances. But I believe whatever I've seen of digital audits and whatever I've done of it, I think that this is going to be the game changer in our profession, in our practice, and will reinstate our role as advisors to the business houses, and will reinstate our position as being there, being with the right advice, telling them information or guiding them before the avalanche actually strikes. Again, the challenge here is being the disruptor or being disrupted. Digital is a reality, and it is going to hit our market whether we like it or not. It is for us to embrace it, to analyze it, to be able to meet the challenge and work with it, rather than create an experience by saying that it involves a lot of investment. Like Riaz also said, that yes, it is a bitter bullet to bite, but it pays itself many times over during the process. We see that in Pakistan also, the businesses are investing in new systems and data analytics because the market is expanding. They are opening new avenues of business. E-technology, e-commerce is the reality today. With COVID hitting us the way it has, and again, the traditional marketing going out of style, a lot of businesses are resorting to data platforms in order to sell their products. And for that also, to gather the data and everything, they need investment in resource, in systems, in order to understand those markets and those customers. The next slide, please. In this case, what do they expect of the audit? They expect that the audit should fit them. We should not be bringing something from outside and imposing it on them. One size does not fit all. The audit should be fitting your industry. It should be addressing your financial statements, your stakeholders, the technology that the client has in place. The audit should blend and mesh with that. It should be able to use the data that is generated out of their ERP and address the risk and compliance issues that they have faced. These are changing at a very rapid pace, and as auditors, we are expected to anticipate that change and to adapt to it accordingly. During the course of my presentation, I would be sharing certain statistics that I have found during my research for this presentation that has been conducted by big four firms all over the world. And they come with the market perceptions of what our profession is doing and how it is contributing to the stakeholder confidence at large. And sadly speaking, only 41% of the investors feel that today's audit effectively serves their needs. So there is a huge market available for an adapted audit strategy that would address the needs of your stakeholder, of your client, because at the end of the day, that is what audit is all about, is adding value to your client. The next slide, please. How can digital help in that? The next slide. We've during the day, we have heard a lot about what digital transformation actually means. It is about connectivity. It is about establishing of digital platforms which connect teams across various locations so that the information can be shared. In times like COVID, these digital platforms help us establish contact with our clients where they feel confident that they can share data with us over the net. Chris talked about Connect with PwC. Deloitte also has a similar platform called Deloitte Connect, where we provide access to our clients and they can upload their data on those platforms, and our practitioners do not need to go to our client premises to do the audit, and they can sit in the safety of their homes and do the audit procedures there also. That's one way of looking at the digital transformation. The other digital transformation that has come across is by the use of different audit softwares. Chris talked about, I believe, Aura is the PwC software. At Deloitte, we have, and Riaz talked about Clara at KPMG. We have the EMS, which works on a central repository of risks and procedures that are that would normally be addressing those risks. They assist us over a period of time to standardize the audits, to be able to measure the quality of audits, and to ensure that similar work is done across territories. Another digital transformation that has come in the audit is the use of analytics. And analytics is augmenting our traditional sampling approach. And we will be talking about a lot of it in my upcoming slides. The next slide, please. Now, in this all, the role of a professional accountant needs to evolve because companies are now churning out huge volumes of data. The data that is accessible to us because of ERPs and systems is far more than it used to be in the traditional bookkeeping modules that were there in place in previous times. Now this information can be used by the auditor to deliver high quality audits. How the center of any audit is appropriate assessment of risk and knowledge of the business. With the internet and with information of the peer group being available so freely, the auditors can actually concentrate on the business that they are auditing and trying to pinpoint the pain areas of that particular business and that particular industry to focus their audit efforts and to be able to deliver an audit where there are insights for the client. As we have said that when we go for audit committee presentations, etc., we should be able to tell the stakeholders what we found in the business, how it compares to the peer group, how the peer group companies are performing in the current scenario, and leave them with certain questions and challenges so that they know what direction their company should be taken. And this actually, the use of technology and the use of comparative analysis is being encouraged by so many audit committee members. In a survey being conducted, 76% of such members said that advanced technology should be used extensively in delivering high quality audits and audits that address the needs of the client and if they are tailored to meet the client's requirements. The next slide, please. Now, the questions in this entire scenario that need to be asked and answered, and this would be coming from for businesses which we call SMPs and the smaller businesses and practitioners who do not have the luxury of being connected to a larger network. Because these questions, the larger networks are already trying to address. That could a technology platform be developed to connect audit teams in different locations and the companies being audited? We've already discussed Connect with respect to PwC and with respect to Deloitte also. Then can we realize the potential of a connected digital audit through centralization, standardization, and automation. Automation will not work for all the processes of audit. Automation will work for more of the repetitive processes that take place, like transaction testing can be probably handed over to a machine, to an AI program and algorithm. The working papers can be standardized and floated across the audit teams. We can have centralized repositories of risk pertaining to certain industries that would help the audit teams in focusing better as far as their work is concerned. Then one question could be, how can data analytics be made integral to the audit? Because as we talked about the augmenting part of the audit, that data analytics may not be able to replace the traditional audit and going down to the source document, but data analytics can be used very effectively to point the outliers in large quantities of data, and therefore focus our attention on the transactions that appear out of the ordinary, rather than focusing the audit effort on transactions that appear more statistically and on a continuous basis. And then again, with all that in place, can we drive value through innovation to the companies being audited? The next slide, please. Today, the auditors, as we're talking about it today, we are trying to put technology at the heart of the audit strategy. With the programs, with the analytics, with the automation, technology is becoming the center of our strategy. And we're trying to employ it effectively to gain access to better data, to gain better access to data and to drive value. We believe that the digitally transformed audit would give better visibility around the business and risk, and I've already discussed that. It has three pillars: automation, analytics, and driving value through digital experience. With all the insights that analytics and transformation can give us, we can ask more challenging questions of the management, rather than the traditional questions of why is the signature not appearing, why the controls, what were the controls in place. Now, with a digital audit, it is expected that the knowledge of the business would enhance, and the auditor would be able to pinpoint the areas, the pain points, and be able to ask more challenging questions. The next slide, please. We are in a better position to understand internal processes, use professional skepticism constructively, challenge management judgments, and assess risk in a better way to develop a more effective audit strategy. And this would lead to enhanced focus on risk, reduce the client's burden. We talked about it earlier also, that the client will not have to fetch out 70, 80 samples of the evidences that we normally ask of. We keep asking the client to give us the warranties, the guarantees, the contracts. Once digital platforms have been established and the data is appearing in more structured way, the client would be in a much better position to get the audit done on a timely basis. And all that would provide unrivaled insights during the audit process. Again, a statistic, there's companies that would leverage on audit information who are 47% more likely to achieve greater growth in their business areas. The next slide, please. The next slide. Now, what do we do in a traditional audit? We normally take a population using a statistical software. We draw out a statistically representative sample from a population. That sample can range from anything from 60 transactions to 100 transactions. And then we ask the client to give us all the information and the source data that is behind the vouchers and the transactions that we have selected. That takes 3 to 4 weeks of audit efforts, going down the source documents and being able to understand what is happening in those documents. How that is expected to change in a digital environment. We believe that with the use of software and other software, there will be a single source of information available. The scripts will be more standardized. There may be a repository to which you can revert to for reference purposes. There can be consultation groups that can be set up, and you can leverage on the knowledge of other audit teams being deployed on similar companies, and being able to share those insights on your own audit. The detailed transaction testing, the pace of that might change, that instead of just concentrating on the 100 or the 60 samples that you selected out of the population, you can, using the analytics tool, you can go through 100% of the population and develop outliers and find out the transactions that appear to be out of the ordinary, and concentrate your audit efforts there, and ask the right questions of the client, and get a better assurance than the assurance of a representative sample. We've talked about use of drones for stock checks and for specialized industry asset evaluations. That can help the mapping of certain areas. I believe the drones are being used in certain countries in mining industry. I saw in my own personal experience, there was this university which was involved in water study, and they wanted to study the water that is coming in the Pakistan environment and in the rivers, and the quality of water that is coming in. And they use drones to go to the source of the water, from where the water is originating, and take pictures from there, and to be able to bring them to the lab and test them and sample them. That can be a way that auditors can use the data that is being highlighted by drones and the pictures that come in. We can also have AI enhanced audits, artificial intelligence enhanced audits, in which peer data is fed to the company, and AI is used to develop ratios and expectations for the client, and compared with the original results of the client, and being able to highlight the problem areas that the client has faced during the year-end question, and being able to ask those questions of the senior management as to why the company performed the way it has. We can also explore virtual reality for training sessions, and all these things are available, are there. We just need to open our minds to it and look at it from a different perspective. Next slide, please. But there are challenges arising out of this revolution. The risks will become more complex. Now we will not be able to hide behind the traditional risks that we used to identify at the start of the planning process. Now we will need to tailor the risks more to the business and more to the environment that is being audited. Then we are going to be facing competition from divergent angles. We will be facing certain stiff questions as to how we can challenge, we can ask questions that were not asked before. And the management may not be very, while they might be encouraging us in the beginning to digitize the audit and to make it more effective, but they may not like the questions that we pose to them once the audit is underway. And one challenge that obviously has been on our head for quite some time is the stakeholder scrutiny. And every time a financial fraud happens, a financial downfall happens, the question is, where were the auditors? I think one of our presenters even asked that question. where were the auditors? The auditors come in once a year, or let's say twice or 4 times a year, but very, very stringent questions are asked of the auditors by the regulators, and quality is expected, super quality expected of us all the time. So I think with digitization, we would be able to focus more on the fraud areas, on areas which appear to be fraudulent, and then investigate more in it, because we would have the kind of time from those traditional audit steps, and we would be able to concentrate more on the pain points. Next slide, please. The data and its impact has gotten power finally. Great. It has also been the focus of regulators and standard setters. The recent standards that have come in from the IAC, IFRS 9, IFRS 17, IFRS 15, they also rely a lot on data, on the availability of data to be able to make those judgment calls that are required in the standards. And they require the company to work with more granular data, like the expected credit loss model that IFRS 9 expects the company to develop, relies a lot on past trends of data and the future predictions of the clients that are going to come in. So the alignment of finance and risk is also being encouraged by the incoming standards that are coming in. I know for sure, I work in the insurance industry, IFRS 17 that has come in. For the first time, the accountants are going to be looking at insurance contracts the way the actuaries look at it, and look at the data and the business from risk point of view and the undertaking point of view. Now, once clients and companies develop the information systems which will churn out this kind of data, the audit also has to follow suit, and they have to develop systems that will lead to end-to-end data-driven audit. They would be able to go into the systems and work around the controls of the IT systems and be able to develop expectations and develop business models and work accordingly. Yes, this would lead to, we expect lead to a reduction of administrative burden during the audit process, because we will not be looking at a certain set of transactions, but we would be concentrating more on the outliers, on the transactions that appear out of the ordinary. So we'll be able to pose better challenges, pose more pressing questions to the management and get better answers. The next slide, please. Now, how can the companies help? I've been talking a lot about the auditors and how the audit will behave, or how the auditor will behave in this environment. But the companies will also need to help, because we need increased amount of data to be available to work around these systems. Now, with modern ERPs, yes, there is a wealth of financial information that is available. The key is giving the auditors access to that data. The key is also to structure the data in such a way that the auditors can extract that information. The company also needs to have, just implementing that system and putting it in place is not enough. They also have to gain a greater knowledge of their own system and their own transaction trail, and being able to monitor the transaction trails throughout the year. Who's making the transaction? Why is that person given that price? All those questions need to be asked early before the auditors come in, to have controls in place so that that data, the validity and the sanctity of that data can be maintained, and the auditors can work around that data. And they also need to broaden the scope. There is a lot of data today in Pakistan that is available only in paper form, like contracts and warranties and guarantees, a lot of paperwork with banks, audit committee minutes. These are all in paper form, and they're not available in digital form. Efforts should be made by the company to make it more digital, so that if the auditors have the relevant tools, they can deploy them and find out and perform their audit steps more effectively. And they should encourage their IT teams and their finance teams also to share the information with the auditors. The next slide, please. The conclusion is that for the audit to move forward, the entire corporate reporting systems need to evolve over a period of time. That is my assessment of the Pakistani environment. The next slide, please. I believe that companies in Pakistan understand the importance of data. The management teams are now becoming more and more younger, more and more tech savvy. Their mindsets are changing. They are willing to invest in those systems and processes that generate the data. But again, there is a skepticism around making that data accessible to the auditors. The general focus is that the auditors should come, stay for a certain period of time, do what is necessary and leave and give a very traditional report. They do not want them to ask those pressing questions. Next slide. There is obviously a data security concern also around the digital platforms. Every now and then we hear that on social media, ever since the social media has become very, very active, especially in Pakistan these days, we see a lot of documents from companies making their way to WhatsApp and to Facebook, and that is not a happy sight for any company. There is a reluctance for sharing that information over digital platforms. In the current scenario, in the COVID situation, we've been to clients, we've talked to them, we've asked them to share their data over Connect. We've explained to them that it is confidential, and yes, there are protocols around them, but they're still reluctant, and they still want the auditors to come physically to their premises and review those documents. There are a lot of companies are still operating complicated legacy systems, and the data that is generated from this legacy systems is not validated by our technology, and it is very, very difficult for us to use that data in our digitally transformed audit. I face that challenge very specifically in audits of banks, because banks have huge amounts of data, and when they extract that data for us to use, it is normally very, very cumbersome. It cannot be transmitted over a digital platform. You need to go and get it on hard drives, and then plugging in those hard drives and getting that data, re-extracting it on our platform is also a challenge in itself. Next slide, please. Hello, am I audible? Hello, am I audible, Chris?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Sorry for the interruption, because of the power position in Karachi. I would be leaving certain questions for all the people involved in the corporate reporting process. What should the CFOs consider in taking this audit forward? I believe that the CFOs are at the right place. They are the bridge between the audit committee members and the stakeholders and the auditors, and their own finance team, which generates that kind of data. The points to be considered by the CFOs could be setting the right tone at the top, letting their finance team know that this time the audit is going to be different. The questions are going to be different. They need to provide information in a different way. Training their staff over a period of time to be able to anticipate those questions and understand that now the auditors will be coming in with a different mindset, with different challenges, and their focus would be on areas which are different from previous audits. Then it will call for a cultural change. It may call for certain training sessions, probably a closer contact with the auditors, a prior engagement with the auditors, expecting them to come and explain to their finance team what the expectation is of them this time. Understanding that the success of this digital audit is dependent on the information being generated from the system, and continue to learn, in the sense that if this time, let's say, if you're talking about current year, the audit is a challenge. Yes, there were hiccups and there were differences of opinion. What the lessons have been learned, and the next time anticipate those changes and bring the changes early and evolve over a period of time. Any other input from CFOs would also be very, very welcome. But those are the things that I thought that CFOs should be considering while we take the digital audit forward. The next slide, please. The chief technology officers, the CTOs of the company, they need to be proactive also, I think now. They don't need to sit in their offices anymore and just tell their subordinates to give whatever cooperation the auditors want. They now need to build a relationship with the auditor to understand their need of data, what kind of data they need, what form they need it in, to understand their digital platform, and to be able to convince their own finance team, their own management team, that there are protocols in place that would help that would help them in getting the information in a better way, the audit done in a more effective and efficient way. And then also work with the auditor to work around the digital transformation of both the company and the audit process, to develop, to invest in systems, to promote investment in systems that actually augment and help in the digital audit process, and at the same time help generate the information that the management also needs for its day-to-day activities. Then probably there can be a possibility of creating automated repeatable processes that would ease the burden of the finance, and which facilitate the auditor also, because they would know that these are repeatable processes, and once if one transaction is identified and validated, then the whole process can be validated in one go. So that is also a very a valid question. Again, any input from all the participants would be more than welcome here. The next slide, please. The audit committee members also need to ask certain questions and need to be proactive here. They need to invest in understanding the potential of digital audit. Again, they are people with vast experience of different companies on serving on different boards. They can bring that value to the table, and they invest in their time and their efforts in understanding what the digital audit can bring to the table, how it can help the management make decisions in a better way, perform or identify the transactions, the outliers in the performance, being able to pinpoint the potholes that led to certain business failures during the current year. So all that, the audit committee members will have to invest their time and effort in understanding those. And for that, they need to engage in conversations with auditors. Just not meet them for 5-10 minutes in the board audit committee that happens at the end of the audit. Engage with them early. Try to understand what they are bringing to the table. Trying to build that bridge between the finance and the auditor. And then be supportive of digitization in their company and in the audit process also. And push for investment in IT infrastructure that would lead to information, more information being processed, more structured data being churned out, and data being available for all for decision making at the right time. The next slide, please. The auditor also needs to be more proactive from this point onwards. because the audit is evolving. The auditor needs to take the finance and the audit committee and the stakeholders along with themselves in that transformation process. It cannot happen in isolation. We can't go to a client and tell them, look, this is our digital audit. This is the way we want to implement it. This is the information that you have to give us and work around it, and expect the client to work around it also. We need to educate them. We need to talk to them, to engage with them. Understand that one size does not fit all. It may not be possible to deploy every tool and on every audit that we are undertaking. Try to tailor our audits according to the size of the organization. Try to educate the client, bring the client on board regarding our processes, regarding the advantages that will bring to the table, and then continue to deliver high quality audits in order for the client to appreciate the value that is being added, and then in time be more receptive to the data needs that are arising. The first year of audit, I believe, is going to be pretty difficult, but moving forward, I think things will work out in a much better way. The next slide, I think. That's about it from my side, and any questions would be very welcome. And sorry for all the interruptions, but that was more attributable to the power and the internet playing tricks. Thank you very much.
Or your mic is mute.
Many thanks, Hina, for your very interesting presentation. It is very pertinent to the prevalent situation right now, and I'm sure it has increased the appetite of many of the auditors to embark upon a digital plan. And without taking much of the viewers' time, I would like to invite Mr. Zulfikar Ali Khosa. His name does not need any introductions. Mr. Khosa qualified as a chartered accountant with EY in Toronto, Canada in 2005, and is a member of the Institute Chartered Accountants of Ontario and the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants. He's also a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan. He plays an active role in the training and development of the firm's professional staff. In this capacity, he has attended several training courses of Video International. He is a member of the Quality Assurance Board at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan and the advisory group of the Accounting Standards Board at ICAP. He will be talking about the digital transformation, which provides new business opportunities in Pakistan. So over to you, Mr. Zulfikar.
Thank you, and a warm welcome to all this afternoon. We've had some great presentations throughout, starting with Chris, Amir,
Mr. Zulfikar, are you with us?
Riaz, and Hina. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I
think so.
Okay, so we've had some great presentations this afternoon, and I'm pleased to continue on that. I will try not to make repeated arguments of what have been already been discussed by the earlier participants. If my presentation can please be brought up on the screen. While the presentation is being brought up, if I can just outline that the digital transformation in Pakistan, as already mentioned by Hina, has also not stayed behind in Pakistan. We have kept up with the pace across the world, and a lot of the digital tools, methodologies, and practices that are in place internationally have been implemented by various firms, and of course, in the counterparts by the entities in the profession as well. Having said that, Sorry, my presentation is not visible to
Yes,
me. Is it visible?
Mrs. Zulfikar, our IT department is making it visible right now. We were experiencing some internet connectivity. It's visible now.
Yes, if we can just, yeah. So the transformation in Pakistan has not remained behind, but having said that, there's an international transformation which has taken place, a paradigm shift, if one would say. Previously, one used to refer to industries as a tech industry, and now one refers to many industries as tech industries. And the accounting profession is one where we are reinventing and rediscovering ourselves. And in years to come, there'll be many aspects of our business, including the assurance service line, which will be considered a technology-based industry. So with all the tools and products that were talked about by my colleagues earlier, I believe that this transformation will come very quickly, internationally and in Pakistan. Next slide, please. If we talk about the literacy level within our firm's professions, there has to be a culture for learning which has to be developed for the rest of the organization. And that's where the challenge is in the digital disruption. There is the historical perspective where there's the traditional assurance team, and then there's the IT assurance and advisory team, which are bifurcated and generally service clients in silos. So there needs to be a coordination between these two sets of teams, which needs to take place. All service line leaders need to be tech literate and be able to communicate with technical teams. However, it does not mean that all executives need to learn how to code and be familiar with programming, but there has to be a basic technical understanding that must be exhibited. Can you please move to the next slides? I think the slide's not moving forward. If your team is having difficulty, perhaps you can allow me to share my screen. Might make it quicker.
Zulfikar, I think that will be nice if you can take control.
Yes. I think that would be great if you could take the lead.
Please, if your team can stop sharing, and I'll quickly take control. Yeah.
Yes. Essen, please stop sharing it because he's experiencing some internet connectivity issue. He's fixing it right now.
Okay, I think hopefully we can see my screen now.
Yeah, it's visible. Good.
Okay, great.
It's visible.
Great. Sorry for that disruption. I'll quickly run through some of the topics talked about. So RPA, robotic process automation, was talked about very quickly. It's not the R2D2 that we all are familiar with from Star Wars series, but these are repetitive tasks that can be performed on a reliable, continuous basis with a high degree of automation and a high degree of accuracy and quality. And we're seeing a number of applications of the RPAs across industry. So it's not only important for us to be familiar with these kinds of tools from an audit understanding perspective, meaning our ability to audit these tools, but several RPA projects can be initiated by firms, and I will share some examples of those. One of the interesting things that's happening, and I think right now is a great opportunity with the COVID-19 situation, this is actually providing an impetus to the digital transformation of our firms. But whilst there's perhaps going to be a move towards more nationalization after this pandemic is over, from a digitization perspective, large international accounting networks at least are moving towards a centralized, optimize and automate approach. A lot of the technology projects are being driven centrally, and a lot of the automation activities will be run centrally as well. So it's a slightly different way of client service that needs to be considered. I talked about RPA examples, but if you look at some industry examples in the banking sector, for example, new customer onboarding, personal loan application processing, invoice processing, subsequent payments testing, expense analytical review, several parts of the tax filing process. All these are examples where RPAs are already in place internationally, and in Pakistan, some of these are already in place as well. One example is bank confirmations from the auditor side. And in several of our industry clients, RPAs are being implemented in a wide variety of processes and functions. So the primary reason for these RPAs, what's driving it from a business opportunity point of view is, of course, cost, quality, speed, and compliance. And with these four sets put together, it becomes very hard to compete with the outcome from RPAs. So referring to what my colleagues were earlier talking about, it would be interesting to have a conversation with audit committee members on some of the efficiencies that we can bring about through our processes, but I'm sure we will have challenges with having audit fee increases passed through if we have, if you talk about all these efficiencies. Naturally, a lot of these projects come with a certain cost and an ROI, but at the end of the day, these are high efficiency projects. Data science, my colleague Riaz talked about it in a great deal, so I won't spend too much time on it, on describing what the specific aspects of this are. But the main theme to take away is that data analytics allows auditors to better track and identify clients' risk profiling, and allows them to make and focus their time more on the more critical areas of the audit where judgment is required. So the data analytics will not only be an enabling tool for the auditor, but will also allow them to do a great deal value add, which brings me to my next slide, which talks about the dichotomy between what we consider data analytics and where the regulator is today. So the challenge is transitioning to ADA, and Chris talked about some of it, but the international standards on auditing from the IAASB have a analytics working group, data analytics working group, which has been formed. And if you look at the latest updates from this group, they admittedly state that while the ISAs do not prohibit the use of data analytics, they acknowledge that the standards need to better address the rapid complexity and the new technological changes. So it's interesting to see that at the IAASB group level, there were some dissenting comments, and this is public information available, as to the pace of some of this standard development. Large number of many firms have already implemented data analytics within their audit approaches, but the auditing standards have not really kept up. And what that does is that creates what is called an expectation gap between the client and the auditor, and also between the auditors and the regulators. If all three of these parties are not aligned as to what the importance, relevance, and reliability of data analytics to the audit process is, they can all reach varying conclusions regarding the implied degree of assurance. So just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, audit data analytics covers a wide variety of areas. It covers the risk assessment procedures, the test of controls, substantive analytical procedures, other substantive procedures, and also helps in forming opinions. And some of these terminologies are specific to our firm, but broadly speaking, they are used internationally. They're called data analytic tests and risk-based data analytic tests. The standards do not have these concepts implemented as yet. The standards still talk about our traditional auditing model. And what was interesting to see in the discussion update from the IAASB was that they have currently other projects in progress, which they believe are of greater importance or a larger project. So their focus is presently on those projects. And the data analytics projects are, whilst there is a working group attached to it, the timelines for the rollout of the standards is not anytime soon, which means we have to wait a while before these standards will come out. So at least for the next little while, there will be some experimentation in the market in terms of this expectation gap. And it will be interesting to see how the regulators react to some of the procedures that auditors are performing using data analytics. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the outcomes from this experiment from a regulatory acceptance and an audit committee expectation point of view are yet to be fully understood. Just to give you a quick few examples of data analytics. So one can look at data analytics and looking at instances of management override and looking at top 10 instances of management override in a system. One can look at bottom 10 and top 10 creators of journal entries within systems. So all these data information is available to auditors. This is excellent information for driving the audit processes through. My colleague also talked about artificial intelligence. One of the other important business utilities in our profession is the concept of a conversational user interface. And what is it? Basically, it is a means of communicating with other parties and providing automatic knowledge transfer and matching expectations of new generation of businesses. So it's also a great learning tool from an HR point of view for learning and development of our teams that are students in our profession. So I'll cite some examples of these later, but this is an area that's drawing attention in our practice lines as well. In real world, of course, several companies use these interfaces as personal assistants for ordering products or services, for news, for information gathering. Some of these are also being used in our profession, and a lot of thought leadership is going out through digital means now, including, for example, the activity that we're doing today. Blockchain, I won't spend too much time on it. It deserves a session on its own, but this is an area that attracted a lot of hype in the last 2 to 3 years. Again, it's an area which is, it's a concept of a digital ledger, and the most relevant example of a technology, I guess, enabler is the Bitcoin, which is an electronic asset. And while Bitcoin does not presently have acceptance across all jurisdictions, and a large number of central bankers are still working through the process of implementing Bitcoin. This is an area where blockchain auditing, again, is a specialized expertise area which needs to be developed by our profession. So in times to come, we will have to engage specific resources to be able to provide these services to our clients. In practice, of course, IBM Maersk had shipping technology through the blockchain mechanism. Swiss banks have introduced it. We've got many examples in the tax regime as well. Just to give you another example, we talked about virtual inventory counts. This is an app, one from our firm. Just to cite an example, where we have an electronic app made available to all auditors, and this is implemented in Pakistan at our firm today. Not this year, but since the last 2 years, where we have a mobile app installed on every staff's Android or Apple device. And once they complete the count, they're able to transmit the data to a central server, which is then capable to produce an automated report. So this is technology that's there today, and it's being used today. So already a lot of our firms in Pakistan are using this kind of technology. Now, just to give you some salient features of impacts to a profession, future audits, of course, will be higher quality enabled by technology, one would hope. But this is only part of the equation. As mentioned by Riaz as well, humans and human judgment will never be replaced. I guess what technology will do is perhaps reduce the outliers of the misliers in terms of the professional judgment that take place in our profession, and the kind of instances we see every year in the news. So hopefully the technology will be an enabler to better professional judgment. The one that I'm quite concerned about is the expectation of the 100% assurance, which there's an expectation if the technology is there, then the auditor should be able to provide it. So we have to be careful when we're selling these products to our audit committees, that they understand that the standards presently still require reasonable assurance. And while the audit committees may expect 100% assurance, that's not presently envisaged under the standards. And it'll be interesting to see how the standard addresses this going forward. So this is an open question mark from my perspective. Of course, we can move to more standardized formats and continuous auditing as approached, and Hina already talked about that instead of the year-end auditing, there'll be an approach towards continuous auditing and auditing throughout the year, because it'll be more technology-based. Of course, it creates new business opportunities for the auditors to enhance areas into assurance, areas of cybersecurity, sustainability reporting. These areas which have had traction and continue to gain traction internationally as well, and in Pakistan. One interesting discussion that takes place is there going to be a shift in the kind of resource that firms have? And there's an expectation that perhaps the more junior resources we hire to do the manual tasks may be replaced with some of the more automated resources, and therefore we may be looking to engage with staff with more science, technology, engineering, and mathematics background, who have ability to understand and process data. So one expects that the curriculum for students will continue to evolve and change, and that will be an important area. And I think our institute is leading in this area. Our institute's curriculum has been changing quite dynamically to respond to this challenge. And I think the only thing then remains is the recruitment cycle will need to change. One would need to look at universities and data science institutes to produce the kind of resources that we require. I was very pleased to see, for example, for some of our viewers, that the IBA has come out with a specialized diploma program on data sciences. And I would encourage people in our profession to pursue that, because this is a skill set which is scarce and will be greatly in demand going forward. Just to give you some examples before I close. So Econ is an automated tool that we use, and it's the business value. This is for handling third-party confirmations. And anyone who is familiar with one of the large headlines these days is the Wirecard fraud in Germany, and third-party bank confirmations, independent confirmations was an issue there, which has shaken the audit profession to its core. And interestingly, this product was rolled out by our German firm. So coming out of our German firm, this is a product which handles automated third-party confirmations, including the integrity checks in between. BDO Advantage is a tool that we use for advanced data analytics and audit data analytics. Again, and a lot of the international firms have these kind of products, so it's something that's accessible to many. Lisa is a robot assistant for the conversational interface I talked about. In Pakistan, we are also trying to implement the same, but we are still trying to look for a good Pakistani name. Lisa doesn't quite fit quite well in our context. BDO e-document is again is a document scanner, scanning tool, which again integrates into our audit reporting tool. This is in use today. BDO Radar is again an conversational interface tool. So through inquiry, the tool automatically populates an internal controls questionnaire using speech recognition capabilities. So again, this technology is there and available. And of course, the portal, which many firms have, is a tool for communication and collaboration, including information sharing. And which brings me to my last slide, which is that digital transformation for accounting firms and our audit profession at large really has, in my view, 4 key components or proponents. One is our clients. Our clients drive the expectations, but also we have to bring expectations to our clients as well. We have to drive some of what, as Steve Jobs said, or as Steve Jobs tried to do, he brought technology in the hands of consumers, which they weren't aware of. So similarly, we have to make our clients aware, our audit committees aware about what tools we can use, how we can use them, and what kind of assurance we can provide using those tools. But again, a word of caution here in terms of the reliance that one can take. And of course, this presents a business opportunity. If the audit profession is able to demonstrate a value add, this generally would result in growth in our firms and growth in our profession. So there's a clear value add. The regulators, of course, need to be on site with the digital transformation process as well. And this means not only understanding our digital audit procedures, but also being able to review our digital audit tools. And again, I'm quite proud and privileged to see that in Pakistan, our quality assurance board at level and our quality assurance system, has kept up with the pace, and we're able to look at electronic audit working papers with ease and remain at pace. But again, this is an area that's evolving, so a lot of work still to be done on this side to have the same wavelength with the regulators. People are, of course, the most important cornerstone of driving any digital transformation agenda. And unless you take your people on board with you, real transformation cannot be achieved. You can have all these tools, but you need people to use them. So I think there are some HR digital transformations taking place as well within our firms in Pakistan. To give you some basic examples, we have digital training, we have digital time and expense reporting. We have digital resource management systems. So all these tools enhance the ability for people to add value to our clients. And what we find that our people in Pakistan, and I'm sure internationally as well, the younger generation, which are our students in our profession and our firms, they acclimatize to this technology with ease, and they drive it forward with great confidence, perhaps more so than some of the more senior members in the profession. One very important point I feel that I just like to leave the thought with is the technology collaborators element. A lot of these digital transformation projects internationally have not been led solely by the firms. They have been led by the firms in conjunction with large international technology players such as Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, to name a few. And I think if there are any technology firms on the call today, I think the gauntlet, the gauntlet is thrown to you in terms of being able to assist the audit profession in driving the digital transformation agenda forward. And Pakistan has a good technology base in terms of the number of companies and the kind of complex work we do. I think there are a number of firms which will be able to provide great technology solutions which would be of great use for the wide spectrum of audit practitioners in our country, both large, medium, and small accounting firms. The largest accounting firms would have access to some of these tools from the international networks, but this is not to say that some of this technology cannot be developed in Pakistan by our technology entities. And I think that's a great opportunity for those entities as well as for our firms in the profession. So I'd just like to stop there, and I'll thank you all for your time and look forward to any questions you may have.
Many thanks, Mr. Zulfikar, for a very interesting presentation. I'm sure viewers are global, regional, and local experts of skilled caliber have shared their experiences and lead discussions which provided us with sagacious discernments on digital audit evolution for the next generation. I'm sure you've enjoyed their deliberations on these topics. So now the time has come for the question and answer session, for which you were waiting. And I would like to invite our Honorable Chairman of Digital Assurance and Accounting Board, Rana Usman Khan, to join me for the question and answer session. Over to you, Rana Sahab.
Thank you very much, Hur. Indeed, it has been a great session. I could see very detailed presentations and deliberations. And now I can see my president as well, who is the chief guest of today's session. Welcome, Khilla Sheikh, to this webinar. I think very detailed and elaborative presentations we have seen, so nothing much is left, but of course, there are a few questions to be asked. Firstly, I will start with Chris. You have touched upon that concept of artificial intelligence and human intelligence. So, how do you see the balance in our profession? Do you see that artificial intelligence is going to take over the human intelligence in our profession, or, as we say that the profession skepticism, profession judgment, so these are the significant elements of our profession. So human intelligence will still be taking or keeping its positions. How do you look at it?
So I think there's a short term and there's a long term. In the short term, I don't think that artificial intelligence or machine learning is going to get into areas of judgment. I think what it's going to do is it's going to help people automate activities that are more mechanical in nature, by including doing routine risk analysis on transactions. That's the kind of thing which the technologies can do extremely well, because a computer can look at every transaction in less time than it takes a human to look at one or two. And so if you can train the computer in what you look for in a transaction that makes it risky, then the computer can augment the audit process by automatically risk rating a large volume of transactions. And so it's that kind of role that I would see machine learning playing a key role in the short term. In the longer term, there are debates and arguments about judgment and whether actually, and this applies to legal courts, this applies to all kinds of areas where people say, well, actually, would it be fairer? Would you get a better, unbiased, consistent result if you had a computer algorithm or a AI model that could make the judgments? I do not think in the next 5-10 years we'll be in that space in the auditing world, but there may come a time when we are, and we're certainly looking at within PwC, we're looking at the application of fuzzy logic type techniques to help automatically answer accounting and auditing questions that come to our technical support line at the moment. So there are areas within that where we are edging towards some of the more judgmental areas. and giving people probabilistic based answers to their questions. But we do believe, foreseeable future, that the role of the audit engagement leader, as the person whose judgment it is that it's appropriate to sign the accounts, is and will remain a key role.
Right. Thank you very much, Chris. Actually, just considering the shortage of time, I mean, there are questions, but we'll be limiting one question each to each speaker. I'm coming to you, actually. You also talked about the SME and SFPs. So considering the practices in Pakistan or practice sizes in Pakistan, of course, the larger firms, they do have access to different tools and technologies through their national networks. But I mean, how do you see that? I mean, what is the way forward to develop SMPs from that perspective for digitalization and technology enhancement?
Thank you. Thank you, Rana. It's a very good question. And in fact, one of the changes that's taking place right now and in the last maybe year or 2 years, so it's very recent, is the emergence of much easier to use and powerful off-the-shelf software packages that can bring in some of that capability that Hena and Zulfikar and Chris were talking about, that does exist in these much larger, purpose-built machines that exist in the larger firms. And so you can look, I really shouldn't name any particular brands because then I can get into trouble because I can't name all of them. But I'm sure if you do Google this, to be honest, I'm not sure what the cut through of some of the most recent, products that are developing is in Pakistan. But I would recommend perhaps that's something really worth exploring, and something we've certainly been exploring here in Australia and New Zealand, are those packages that are emerging, because it absolutely is a game changer if, where that software is coming into the hands of users on a much larger basis. And that's the nature of technology. That's what Moore's law means, with processing power and the capabilities of the software constantly improving. So I think it's a very bright future. And in fact, that's one of the things that is happening and changing right now.
Right. So you are suggesting off-the-shelf softwares to start with, and then definitely it can be rolled out by the individual firms.
Absolutely, yeah. Look, I think there are a range of it's probably fine to mention, there's companies like Inflow Software, Caseware, and all of the key providers now are at the stage, and there are new ones emerging that are at the stage now where what even a year ago or a couple of years ago was thought to be purely the province of very costly bespoke IT sort of projects, now is coming into products that a small family firm could notionally afford and be able to implement. It's the same with just about any technology you might care to talk about. The processing power in your mobile phone, I believe, is many times greater than the processing power that they had when they were sending, rockets up to the moon. It's the same type of thing. And that's what's happening and really changing the game. Of course, the other side of that is practitioners in those smaller firms accessing and embracing and learning the new skills that come along with putting those tools into practice. That's something where the professional organization, and I'd like to finish in congratulating ICAP and your efforts in bringing this session together. This is very much what is needed to be able to push practitioners along in that regard.
Thank you very much, Amir. Coming to Riaz. Riaz, you also mentioned in your presentation that we belong to sort of similar jurisdictions, like at ICAP or in Pakistan, certainly we also have this obligation to train a lot of people in our profession. So definitely with technology, if number is reduced, of course, it is going to be a big objection from the community perspective as well. But certainly improving curriculum of our students, or putting something into their studies and learnings, if can we enhance their skill set? So what could be that content which they should be learning? They should be reading, educating, and getting skill set development, so that they are able to serve the firms first, and then of course going back to the industry, as we the firms also serve as nursery to these industries to bring these finance professionals to them.
Thank you. I think you're right. The institutes have a responsibility, and I have spoken to our institute as well, that our syllabuses need to change, and even our training has to be reviewed. You see, the key thing that goes in our favor is that, the new guys who are coming into the profession belong to the Y generation or whatever, the younger guys. They take to technology very quickly. But it's important that we should gear our syllabus and our teaching and our training to leverage on those tech-savvy young people. If we continue to keep teaching them the old syllabus and the old forms of training, we are dumbing them. So it's important for the institute to seriously consider this, because if it doesn't happen, we will have very little use for these young people coming out. If every boy who joins my firm now starts off with a laptop, which we have to do because we don't have papers anymore, and unless he is able to navigate through that audit software, through all of that, he becomes an unnecessary overhead for us. So I think the institutes need to understand that the firms are also running a business. While we do take our obligations seriously about training the next generation of accountants, we can do that best. They must also make sure there's a two-way street. They must also make sure that they must give us the right material in, who have got the basic skills in the right knowledge, training, and the syllabus, etc., so that they can hit the ground running when they join us, rather than we spend right now. To be fair, we spend a lot of money and effort. I have in my building a dedicated floor purely for training, which is booked 365 days. And we do a lot of training, but it's all costing time and effort and money. So I think institutes have a role to play in having a robust dialogue with the firms, with the industry, to make sure that they produce the right material so that we can continue this association. I think the association has held us good for going forward. We have produced some outstanding accountants. We have done a great service to industry by producing top quality accountants. But unless we are prepared to change, we may become irrelevant in the new norm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Riyad. Coming to Hina, I think you rightly mentioned that certainly these technological advancements have to be implemented at client first, and then of course auditors are going to take over. So from, let's say, a perspective of the multinationals, they do all these investments because of their the reason they are connected with their networks, and they have to do it. But when it comes to our local industry or local clients, certainly things are dependent on the personalities. If somebody is willing to make investments, they'll make investments in technology. Otherwise, things may not develop. So, how do you see, and what is your message to local investors, and then, of course, to the auditors, to adopt these latest technologies and make investments? What is the way forward in your view?
Thank you, Rana Sahab. Yes, it is a reality in Pakistan that we have family-owned businesses and large businesses which are owned by families. The best thing that is happening in all these is that the newer generation which is coming in is very cognizant of the development in the world and in technology, and they want to rely on technology to do the work for them. The upcoming generation is also pretty tech savvy. So I think as auditors, it should be our target. That generation is more of our target. The older generation would fall in line once they see the result of the technology. And that is why I also mentioned in my presentation that we as auditors need to engage with them on an early level. If we are number one, we can't do this thing in isolation. We can't bring digital audit in Pakistan, or it is already there, but we can't go to a client and they don't have a system and we tell them that, you know, these are the tools that we have and we want to deploy them on your client. That cannot work. It is a dialogue. You need to work with them. You need to tell them the advantages that the digital audit can bring to their business and the value addition that it can bring. And yes, the change will only come about once the mindsets change. I am very, very hopeful with the clients that I am dealing with. The younger generation is very, very cognizant of the changes in the tech world, and they appreciate the change, and they are bringing the older generation around also. But yes, it is an expensive proposition, and until and unless it justifies the cost, nobody is going to invest in it. But we need to engage in dialogue. We need to talk about it. We need to talk about the advantages that it brings to the table. And then, yes, probably some of them might agree. And then this whole transformation process will begin.
Thank you, Hina. Zulfikar, thank you very much for very insightful presentation. I must say, very relevant in the current scenario. Considering the contents of your presentation, how do you see the change in the landscape of audit profession in Pakistan? I mean, do you think that we are keeping pace with that, or we are lagging behind? I mean, what are the critical 2 or 3 messages for the auditing profession from your side?
Yeah. Thank you, Rana Saab. So firstly, as I mentioned in my presentation, I think I moved to Pakistan in 2005 after having spent the first part of my professional career in Canada. And when I came to Pakistan, I was I shouldn't say pleasantly surprised, but I was pleasantly greeted with the state of affairs that Pakistan was fully aligned to the rest of the world. And I think credit goes to senior leaders of our profession in the earlier years who had the foresight to adopt international standards on auditing and the IFRS in its earlier years. That has really allowed us to keep pace. Having said that, I do see a different landscape going forward. I think the digital transformation will bring different futures for different kinds of audit firms, and the public interest entity audit market is going to be very different in Pakistan. We have a new regulator in the auditor oversight body of Pakistan as well, so a lot of the changes will be driven through their agendas as well. But I do expect some consolidation in our audit firms, because I think with digital transformation there is investment required. And unless that digital transformation takes place over a value of business where it makes commercial sense, that will not happen. So I see some consolidation taking place in the years to come, and in that transitory time, I feel that there will be perhaps 2 different kind of futures for 2 different or 2 or 3 different classes of firms. But having said that, and the message in my presentation was that I feel that all firms have access to technology. Amir talked about off-the-shelf packages, which from a Pakistan perspective still are admittedly still quite expensive given the audit fees in our market. And I think a lot of professionals would agree with that, because we've discussed this. So that's where I feel that the challenge is for local technology firms to come on board and play a partnering role. It helps build their business, and it creates a business opportunity for some of these firms who don't have access to international tools. But I think that digital transformation, if the clients don't require it, the people will. So it's a necessity that has to come.
Thank you very much. And at the end, I think we have a lot of questions, but certainly paucity of the time, we can't continue further questioning. So at the end, as being the host of this event, I would like to thank you all, but their formal vote of thanks is there. We already lined up our worthy council member Iftikhar Taj for that. He has been given that responsibility to formally thank you all, but being the host, of course, you have spent a lot of time, a lot of effort must have gone into it, and look forward to see you again in our future events, of course, and all the participants, those who have been with us for the last 3 hours. I think it's a great patience for them as well, and I hope that it has been a great learning for them. So back to Hoor with these words.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khan. Dear viewers, I would like to extend my gratitude to our distinguished speakers for prolonging the session so that our chief guest may join us within the given time limit. And I'm glad that our chief guest and President ICAP, Mr. Khalilullah Sheikh, is with us right now. He is the great visionary Doan who has taken the Institute to the next strategic level. I request him to please address the viewership and share his views on the topics of discussion. Over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Hoor, and Assalamu alaikum. Very good evening, afternoon, morning to all the participants wherever you are. My sincere regrets, I'm a bit late in the program, but I've been enjoying very interesting discussions since I joined. My compliments to Rana Osman Sahab, the chairman of our Digital Assurance and Accounting Board, for organizing this wonderful program. And of course, gratitude to all our distinguished speakers for taking time out of their busy schedules and sharing their thoughts, their wisdom, their experience with the participants. I, being on the other side of the table, as a customer of assurance services, I mean, I've been enjoying this discussion because as a customer, what is exactly that you need is a high quality assurance in terms of high quality audit in most efficient way, be it from a time perspective or from a cost perspective. And I believe this digital is the way forward. It's a great enabler in that. Given that the audit profession is in the spotlight these days because of, unfortunately, some audit failures, I believe this technology is also providing a great opportunity in that way to regain that public trust if we embrace it with the right professional skepticism and with the right skill set. I agree with our distinguished guests. They talked about the tool set, they talked about the skill set, and they talked about mindset. And that's exactly the three components you need to embrace change, which is always faster than ever. And as we move forward, it will be faster than ever. Now, I mean, I know that it's been a long discussion, so I'll be very brief. What I understand is that what this change requires is participation from not only the firms, individuals, but also from the professional accounting organizations as well. As assurance leaders, I mean, they need to invest in the right tool set. They need to invest in the right skill set of their teams. And of course, the mindset part is the prerequisite, as most of you already said. From an individual's perspective, I believe it's a lifelong learning process in any field, as technology is reshaping really every other aspect of our life, personal and professional life, and we have to continue to upskill ourselves, and that's a new normal that we have to live in. Now, coming especially from a professional accounting organization perspective, I believe there are a few aspects which are important, and that's where I'll talk a brief about and what we are doing at the institute level as well, focusing more on that side. I believe the first important aspect is to attract and inspire talent into the profession. These are interesting times for profession. And I agree with Chris that this technology is going to augment, is going to complement the human intelligence and human side. I don't see in near future as well, this technology. And we had these debates at IFAC level as well. I'm part of the IFAC PIB committee, where we discussed for 2 years how the finance function is going to look like in the next few years. And we came to this conclusion, both from an accounting perspective, as well as you rightly said, from an assurance perspective. Technology is going to augment and complement the human side. And what is required is to have the right skill set. And for that, I think these are interesting times. So coming back on that what FPOs we need to do is to attract and inspire talent into the profession. Then we need to rethink like every business is rethinking on their business model, we need to completely rethink. We have to be humble and flexible in understanding that these are different times, and we have to have different models of professional development, training, and curriculum. I mean, these process of reviewing the curriculum every 5, every 7, every 10 years and during different jurisdictions may not work going forward. Maybe coming up with quick certifications of reskilling people every now and then, a completely different way of professional development. Probably that's going to be the way forward for professional accounting organization. Well, we are reviewing our curriculum as well, and as most of the organizations are, but I think that curriculum is also going to be redundant, many aspects of it sooner than later. So this has to be a continuous challenge and a continuous process that we need to work on. Another, I think, important aspects of PAOs is to ensure that they become trusted advisors in terms of connecting the professionals with the tools that are available in the market. Not from the big four or the large firm perspective, but I've seen many mid-tier and smaller firms, they struggle to find and choose between the right tool set, and they are many a times not even aware of that. So from our perspective, what we decided was, it has been delayed because of COVID, is to organize a finance and accounting exhibition. But as an institute, we become a credible, trusted intermediary in providing a platform to the service providers and the customers and getting them connected. And the third thing that we have been working on, and I believe the institutes will have, is to invest in innovation and research themselves as well. As an example that we are doing is going to establish an ICAP incubation center, which will be a start of our own journey towards encouraging entrepreneurship, innovation in those areas. So with these brief thoughts, I once again compliment our Assurance and Accounting Board for organizing a wonderful seminar. These seminars, these sessions are in fact also a way to inculcate, educate, and prioritize this transformation. And thank you so much, Rana Saab, and over to you, Hoor.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. I'm sure the viewers enjoyed your insightful and perspicacious speech. Now I would like to request one of the most seasoned veterans of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Pakistan to express his sincerest gratitude to the Honorable Chief Guest, Chairman, Digital Assurance and Accounting Board, and distinguished speakers. Mr. Iftikhar Taj, he is our council member and he is also a member of the Digital Assurance and Accounting Board. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Before going for any other person, I'd like to thank my foreign guests in the webinar, Mr. Chris, Mr. Amir, and Mr. Riaz in particular, and all other speakers and panelists, including Ms. Hina and Zulfikar. I hope I'm not missing any other name, for this wonderful dialogue. And I'm grateful to Chairman Rana Osman for initiating this dialogue. It was very much required during this time. And this is a great initiative. And I think ICAP Council has done one great job, at least which is visible right here, right now, that we formed Digital Assurance and Accounting Board. That was need of the time. And that was very, very important. Talking about the international and regional perspective, I think region is expanding now. Whole globe is a region now. It's no more the case like Zulfikar mentioned when he came back to Pakistan in 2005. He was surprised that accounting standards, auditing standards, all are applicable in Pakistan. We are at the same level. But yes, complexity of clients and the service needs of clients are different in different countries and different regions. We must keep on doing these kind of dialogues. If not every month, then every quarter. And I would strongly request Chairman Rana Osman to please carry on this tradition, make it a tradition to have these dialogues along with other work that we are doing in the board. At the same time, I think coming questions are very, very important. What is going to happen with S&P around the world? Leaving aside top 10 firms, what is going to happen with them? Are those going to merge all the time? When we are looking at that, regulators are asking to separate assurance and non-assurance business. Would assurance firms have that kind of investment to invest into technology and tools? Would they be able to train professionals? And then we need to create whole ecosystem. It's not going to happen in isolation. It's not to happen for a few clients only. It's not for the larger clients only. Whole ecosystem needs to be developed. There will be a transition period, and life will be really tough during transition period. Then there will be new norm. So all accounting firms needs to gear up, and ICAP also needs to gear up. We in the council, we need to discuss all these things. As a professional accounting organization, we have certain responsibilities, and we need to lead. We know we need to show the light to our accounting professionals, and not only accounting firms, CFO side as well. Like President mentioned, IFAC and all. We have to see when you have changing requirements for your clients for digital auditing and all, what will be the role of CFO, how they need to gear up, and what will be the composition of CFO firms in future. Are we saying that we will be having only accountants, or there will be greater portion of technology graduates as well? Because in the end, this is all going to be technology. Digital is all technology. So what kind of composition, what kind of formation of the firms and finance departments at the client side and regulator side. We need to educate our regulators as well. Although we have certain boards where we have the regulators on our platform and we can always convince them, guide them, educate them, but we need to make more efforts on that front. And before thanking Rana Saab and Hood, I like to appreciate great effort of our president, Mr. Khalilullah Sheikh, and thanks for coming back to the show, because you have shared about 95% of my burden, and that made my life very easy. And secondly, I believe that this great initiative needs to be led by president as well, like you have been on the show. That's very, very important. And that shows the seriousness of institute into these affairs. And Rana Usman Sahab, great job done. All the technology people and other people, they have done the great job, and wonderful MOC Sayyida Hurul. Thank you for this wonderful show. I'm grateful on behalf of ICAP, not only ICAP, but the audience as well, that this is done greatly and very, very good teamwork. With that, I hand over the control to MOC Sayyida Hurul. Thank you very much.
I'm humbled by your kind words, sir. So thank you so much for joining us on this dynamic journey, packed with global, regional, and local perspectives on digital audit evolution. But the board's journey doesn't end here. DAAB, the board, is coming up with a lot more to transform the profession of chartered accountancy into digital environment. Here is a short clip for you. Essen, can you please play the video? Stay tuned. The journey of superstardom is about to begin. In the end, I would like to acknowledge the names of my team members who are my real arms. Without them, I may not be able to do this. First of all, Arsalan Rabbani, who actually made this video, and it was our brainchild. We invested a great length of time in making it happen. Besides Mr. Umair Jamal, his presence is a great source of encouragement for the entire team. He is the man behind this show. Rana Saab, indeed, he is the great support for all of us. Besides Adnan Usmani, Imran Hafiz, Shanawaz Abro, Ehsan Fayaz, and I hope I'm not missing out anybody who helped us out in making it happen. So a lot more is going to come from the both sides. So stay tuned with us. With these words, goodbye to you all and Allah Hafiz.